Oh, hey, this is Pops killing a banana. It takes quite a while for this thing to start up, so I always try to find something else to do for a few seconds. I know it only counts 3, 2, 1, but that doesn't mean anything. That's just numbers. That's not necessarily a time frame. you know, One of the handiest tools I almost never use, the Leatherman. I tried some other styles. Who is it? Gerber built one for Snap-on. I broke 3 of them in a row. Pointless. Completely pointless to own a Snap-on Gerber. Or is it a Gerber Snap-on? Pick one. It's just pointless. Unfortunately, the Leatherman builds their little wire cutters with replaceable jaws now too. I had one called the Fuse before. They don't make it. They don't even make one that's similar. And that had built-in, heat treated. You kidding? I could sit there and snap. I put all my other pliers away. I could sit there and cut and bend a coat hanger. Yeah, with the Leatherman. Smaller than the pliers, easier. Well, I still can with these, and they're bigger. So that's why I went and bought another Leatherman. Why buy something else that just ain't going to do it? We got a Winchester as a gift. Junk. All right, get down to it. Blue collar, white collar, whichever one is watching here. Here's the idea. Now, you'll notice I don't bother to look over here for who was ever doing what and answer questions because A, I'd have to put my glasses back on, and B, I'm not here for discussion. Discussions end up being pointless. And that's from watching other YouTube videos. But my idea here, as I contort my mouth to move the banana around where it belongs, one of the things that I keep coming across in my mind, and I'm guessing the Lord himself has spoken it there, so I'll give it to you, is the idea of you're following orders all the time, or are you careful how you follow orders? I said, well, now wait a minute. And I said, no, that's just saying I always follow orders. Well, that's a blanket stupid statement. That's also one to get you in trouble. I always go out and do what I need to do. Forget what the boss says. I just nod my head and go. Well, that's a dangerous trap too, for 2 reasons. Both of them are actually. Because I ran into 3, 4, 5 at Anderson Equipment. If they didn't like you, they set you up. And I mean as in they didn't like you without even knowing that you proved them wrong on a certain issue. It could be that somebody called, talked, and said, well, so-and-so did this. Maybe your guy can try that. And they find out it worked, but it wasn't their idea. Let me tell you, if the right blue-collar worker has a white collar under his arm, you're going to get burned. And that's the way Anderson was designed. Don't ask me why. I know the owners didn't care. As long as what they wanted done was done, they didn't care. They just wanted it written up so it looked pretty. Honesty didn't matter. So, what is the other part of the whole thing that finally came to fruition later on? And this is real activity we're talking about here. What came later on, just as I was about the last 2, maybe 3 years as I was planning on leaving the company, I'd had enough. A two-faced, lying, backstabbing. I mean, it was, they tell you to do one thing that, this guy is sure it's going to work, and you know it won't. So you're screwed before you even go out. Oh yeah, they had a couple of desk jockeys there that thought they knew everything because for a very short time period, they worked for Komatsu Direct. So they knew everything. And they were clueless, never operated a machine, never repaired a machine, just pushed paper and, gigabits around, or terabits as it is now. So I mean, people that were narcissistically stupid. So what would happen? I had kids come running out, and they were interns. And it was more than once, and it started from the first intern on through. Come running over and said, he handed me this material, but it can't be right. I said, what do you mean? I'm taking a look at, this isn't even the machine, and he tells me, use this information. And I laughed and said, well, it's not. What do you mean? I said, you ran into why we have a problem here and why you're going to hear, and you've already heard, I'm sure, that they can't stand me. Well, yeah, he told me to stay away from you, but that's crazy. He has no clue. Who else am I going to come to? I said, go to Kevin. Well, yeah, but Kevin's not tech, and he's the one that told me to come to you. Okay, Kevin is tech. And so what do you mean? I said, Kevin doesn't believe he's tech, but he is tech. So you can take those times to actually develop your relationships in the shop. Was Kevin at the level I was there? No. But Kevin was good. Kevin was tech. And there was no reason except that he just didn't want it. Why? For the reason I'm going to discuss immediately here. We were working on Dash 8 and Dash 10 excavators at the time. And the 8s were out and been out for a while. Actually, some of the 7s were still coming through. We had 8s, and the 10s were starting to filter in. And these interns come out and said, this isn't our machine. This is old. Look at the publication date. And they actually sat there and were reading this whole thing, trying to learn. They said, this is crazy. We're talking about open center load sensing systems, and these aren't open center, are they? And I said, no, they haven't been open center for many years. I said, all standard Dash 6 machines in Komatsu speak, up to a certain point, are all closed center load sensing. You get up into the huge monsters, now they're open center load sensing. Why would they do that? Because it's easy. And then they're big. And the response is different. They can make the pumps less expensive because they don't have to build up all this pressure and then sit there. They say, oh, okay, well, it's, yeah, when the open center load sensing system goes to neutral, it's always moving oil. So when you request it to do something, all you're doing is developing pressure against it and turning the pump on. And there's already lag time. So it helps. When the oil's moving, it's always cooling. Closed center load sensing, you got to have coolers and your bypasses, and things are a little different. But on the smaller stuff, it works considerably better because you're more fine-tuned. Up in the big guys, fine-tuning is you're within 3 feet. That's pretty much it. So it's slower, the whole 9 yards. He said, oh, okay. And it's reliable. It's a good system. So he said, well, then why did he hand this to me? I know it's not closed center load sensing. I said, yeah, I know. But he handed it to me for 2 reasons. So why? One of them is he's stupid. There's just no way around it. The other one is he's pretty sure you're going to come running to me or Kevin. And then he can go back and say, well, where did you hear that? And he can get angry at you and or me and or Kevin or whoever else that we didn't follow directions. What am I supposed to do? I said, well, I guess you have a decision to make. I'll sit here and teach you how you're, to go through. We'll get the right book and get you underway. Well, the boss came out a short time later when the kid went in and described to him, said, well, this was the wrong information, so I went and got, how did you know to get that? Well, I asked. What do you mean? And he got a little bit of a reaming. The guy came out, and I sat there and said, who's the idiot that handed him that paper? I said, what do you mean? I said, I asked the question. I said, who's the idiot that handed him that paper? That's not even relevant for 10 years now. What's going on? Well, I gave him that paper, so at least he'd have an idea what he was looking at. It's what? Dash 5 versus Dash 8? 20 years apart? You got to be kidding me. Well, you had him countermand my order, and you had... No, I didn't. He asked me for information. I gave him the correct information. Apparently you couldn't do that? Well, that's not the point. That is the point. You almost sent the kid down the wrong path to damage a machine. The kid knew better than you did. So what are you doing here? Now, mind you, I was in a position where I could do that and had been with the company long enough that it was possible to do that. If you're new with the company, you have a decision to make when you know. You come out, there's nobody else to talk to. In fact, in many cases, there are shops out there that in the Anderson system, if you talk to somebody else in the shop who has the tech information, the boss will be angry. There's a moratorium on sharing information in the shop. While they call you into the meetings and demand that you share information within the shops and between the branches. So it's a hard thing to do. But it was a blue-collar, arrogant setup that, in fact, the white-collar guy didn't even know that he'd set the situation up. He was so ignorant. Well, what's the cure? There is no cure. That's cases you're going to have trouble accepted. The information's wrong. Go find the correct information. In the end result, the final in all of this is you're the blue collar guy on the bottom of the line that has to do the troubleshooting, the repair, etc., as long as you're allowed. Because I had a boss, the one little boss there, the little jackass, that if he didn't like what you said, he'd pull you off the job. He'd just put you on, and you're part way through. We had one job that there were 5 people that went through that job. 5. And there were only 4 of us in the shop, but he put himself into it too. And when he came to the end conclusion, what I had told him in the first place was exactly what the problem was. Tried to point that out to him because a particular engine had a particular fault at a particular age, almost like clockwork, like a switch went off and a piston would go bad. Well, in each case, they were high hours, 12,000, 10,000, 15,000 in that area. They'd be worn. Guys would be using ether to start the things, and they'd break a piston, usually in one particular cylinder. 4-cylinder, it was 4. 6-cylinder, it was 6. And you'd find 5 damage because they keep running it. On the 6, you'd barely notice number 6 being a problem. So they'd keep going at it, and then finally number 5 would be almost as bad. And then they'd notice something, because, stuff's coming out the breather. I pointed that out, and the little guy, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, oh, really? And you do? This is rich. You go right ahead. So besides that, we were hired the same time, and I think I've got a few decades more experience than you. But you know what? You go right ahead. Injectors, and I think we put in 4 injectors. They put in an injection pump. I ended up putting the pump in because nobody else wanted to put it in when they took it out. They didn't set the time right. They just said, pull the pump out. So he pulled the pump out and left it for me to put in. I was supposed to fail. So when I talk about setups and people with arrogant attitudes, there's no cure. If you know what you're doing and you're doing it right, you read the book and you follow the procedures, and when the procedures come up to something faulty, you need to ask questions. And there's other times that there'll be 21 steps. I ran into that at Cummins Northeast. And the problem isn't on the last 13, 14 steps. Shortcut it. Don't be wrong, shortcut it. And shortcut, because I had one that was low engine oil pressure down near idle, and it flashed the light on. Well, there's only 2 things that could do that without any serious trouble and have the machine continue to operate. There were only 2, leak in the jakes, and because it was an N14 STC, I believe, kind of a unique engine. And the other one was the oil jets for the piston cooling. I was pretty sure it was the oil jet and the piston cooling, but you check the jakes, that's the first thing. And I said, okay, I need an oil pan gasket. And so what do you mean? Need an oil pan gasket? I'm pulling a pan. I need oil and a filter. Guy blew a quart, yelling, screaming, whooping. Then he gave me the orders of what to do after that. Next day I come in, he's yelling at me about that. And I looked at him and said, listen, jackass, while you're shooting your mouth off, I'm the boss. I said, you're an idiot. I said, step 7, pull the pan, take a look. Well, you might have been able to replace them from the outside. I said, right, they're all on the outside, except for 2 that are covered by the oil cooler. I said, guess what? Tell me, how do you troubleshoot from the outside? Come on. Well, if you'd have gone through all the steps, I said, it would have been another 2 hours and you'd have put it on to the next shift anyway. I asked for a pan gasket, pull the pan off, you find one broken, you look up in with a flashlight, you see which one it is, you do what you need to do to replace it. If it's not by the oil cooler, pop, 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 in and out. Put her back together, oil and filter, and gone down the road. And I said, I could have been done yesterday. Well, you didn't follow the proper steps. And I said, you didn't listen. You're too stupid, a jackass. Well, I was able to get away with it because he was a shop foreman type for that shift foreman. He wasn't the official shop foreman, and he was not the service manager. So I was able to talk back to him because I had far more experience than he did. In fact, the only reason he was available was he almost killed somebody in his own shop twice, knocking machines off of jack stands with a mechanic underneath him while he was driving a forklift. So they had to hire him, of course. We'll make him management. He's a screw up. And then that's exactly what it was. A while later, he was removed from his position. It's just interesting how these people can come up to this crap, and they hire people just like that because, ooh, he has experience. And they don't bother to get to know the person behind the experience. So that's 2 situations where, with experience, you can argue back. And I made him look like a fool, especially in my write-up. So when we got done the end results, you've got 2 of them now. What are your decisions? The decisions are yours. You're going to follow orders exact. Now you have two choices also after that. When you're following those orders, are you requesting the procedures that you want them to follow while you're following those orders? Or are you nodding your head saying, I will follow your procedures as long as I can, is what you're saying to yourself. Going to the book, getting the appropriate procedures, and making sure you're doing it. So that when the argument comes up, why didn't you do what I said? You can tell them specifically, I went to the manual as I'm supposed to do and trained to do, and found out that your procedures didn't match up with the proper troubleshooting steps. So you need to be able to document that. So you either follow right out all the way out to the end and schmooze while you're doing it. You have to schmooze their ego and usually lie your face off and other anatomical parts. And that's your choice. But the other one is be a technician. Follow proper procedures. You say, well, you shortcut a procedure. I said, I did. So, well, yeah, but I was following proper procedure. You see, in each thing, there are a list of things to follow, especially in a low oil pressure. But if you have a suspicion and you know because of the age of the engine, the type of engine, and the most common places that this incident occurs, like I did, up here and down here, because of head bearing trouble, we'd be talking about something else entirely different. For bearing trouble, he'd have been going down the highway and the oil pressure would have been slowly going down as it warmed up. And he'd been talking about that. We didn't talk about that. He just said, no, things fine going down the highway. It was a small loss that the pump could recover once it was up above about 1200 RPM, maybe even a little less, because they idle about 850, 950 in that range. So crack 1,000 RPM, it's fine. But it was spraying oil all over inside the engine, which means a higher oil consumption as well, and one piston that could burn. So being that the driver was suspect, he did something interesting. He drove carefully and brought it to the dealer. We could have found it very easily, but you have to make those decisions. If I'd have followed the steps, the thing to do is every time you want to follow the step exactly as the boss wants, which I'm not going to say is necessarily wrong on your public relations side within the company, that you're a team player guy, which means you're a wuss doing what you're told. Ask them for the procedures and to show you where the procedures are in the book, especially if you're under 30. Oh, they love that stuff. They'll eat it alive. When they have your torque wrench out everywhere you go, even though you know what the torque is or it's not important, just have that torque wrench laying there. Oh, some of these guys are impressed when a youngin has a torque wrench and he's tightening a piece of tin. Or putting a hood on, or clipping a fender on. They get excited and they see that torque. Ooh, he's being careful. So you can be hours beyond scheduled time. They won't care because you're careful. As long as you're young. When you're older and they see that torque wrench, what are you doing? What do you mean? You know how to tighten that. Sure, but it gets you excited to see a torque wrench. When you're older, sometimes you need to do that to put them in their place. Managers can't stand somebody that knows more than they do and has more wisdom than they do. Majority of them. You're running about 10% that they do, and the companies usually run them out of Dodge because they want people to do what they're told all the way down the line. We want this. We don't care how it happens. We want this end result. Or the opposite. They don't know what the end result is, but they want this procedure. Well, you have a choice. Follow it or not. Your technician on the line on the other side, that's what you're going to come up with. But on the white collar side, let me tell you how to handle some of this. You don't know the information? Find it. You don't know where to find it or what you're looking for? You know what your actual obligation is? Now, this is for the reasonable, the guy that has some morality left in his body, who's not sucking up to everything that comes down the pipeline, the manure that they're throwing at you. If you actually have a spine and you're a good white-collar manager, when you're writing up the work order, the 7 steps of troubleshooting are in the back of your mind, whittled down to 4. And you say, well, we already know that, but you don't. You think you do. even if you've been in a shop, but your brain got sucked out when you took that white collar job. You know, blue content, white, bleached. Okay, your mind's been bleached. You're in the white collar range. That's just fact of life. While you're there, always remember the four, but the last two are more important than anything else. The complaint, the cause, however, the correction and the confirmation are more important, and you're going to have to depend on your tech for that, which means you need to be involved, or your service writer involved. If you have a service writer, then the only thing he should be handling is intake, parts, and paperwork, and maybe not even paperwork, depending on how your place is set up. If you do the out paperwork for the customer work, then service writer may have time to take care of warranties, which are far more troublesome. But neither of you should have all of that. You say, well, why would I write up a work order that I didn't take in? Well, because if you're a good service manager, you're the one in the shop. And if you're a good service manager in a large shop, you're the one in the shop working with the shop foreman, who hopefully doesn't have too much to do other than repairs and take lists. And if you do have a good shop foreman, you're large enough, the shop foreman's taking care of the parts list for the mechanic while he's doing his work, or tooling, etc. And then they can keep moving, and your shop foreman is actually earning his pay by assisting the mechanics in the shop. But it'll be your job to make sure he's not playing bigotry and prejudice with people depending on personalities and colors and such. So that's another thing. Well, what, dress? If they come in dressing LGBTQ or Mormon or Presbyterian or with a flowing robes or anything else other than your shop garb, toss them out. Well, you did it. Well, yeah, I did. That's right. But I didn't. You say, what do you mean? I might walk in the morning with the company shirt on, the big button up and all that heavy garbage. I worked at several places where the shirts they put on were not in consideration of the weather and the situations we were working at. It's extreme heat, mud, slop, and some others. We wore t-shirts. Mine almost never had any writing on them at all. Not even the manufacturer, except maybe an occasional logo. Others did. But if they get into a spat with you, one of the first things they're going to say is, you put the proper uniform on. And I pull out the handbook. There it is. You know it. Well, we're going to change that. And I said, yeah, you haven't. And until you do, I will be wearing these shirts that are appropriate for where I'm going. Well, nobody's going to recognize you. And somebody looked at him and said, I think the big sticker that's 10 foot long down the side of the truck will cover that. If the phone number and address on the door doesn't help. That was just somebody who was an egotist. Certain people he's going to fight with in the shop. Why? No, like the union picks the lowest common denominator. You white collars, unfortunately, sometimes pick the upper echelon to fight with. Well, the union's picking the lowest common denominator to fight with, but also get him through saying everybody else in the shop is okay if I keep the screw up here. They're two faulty thoughts. You don't get along with somebody in the shop, but he's a good mechanic. Then shut your mouth and deal with it. He gets out of line, just say, hey, look, it's too far. Back off. I want you to go out and shop and cool off for a while. Then come back in and talk. Well, no, wait a minute. Look, I'm your boss. I don't want to have to do anything more than that. Just tell you to cool down. And let him go. If he starts in again, stand up and say, branch manager's right out there. You want to keep this going? Or do you want to cool off and come back in later? You need to take charge in that instance. Seen it, been there, understand it. But you're always going to get the guy that will not follow your instructions. Always. That's me. Because 100% of the time I was given faulty instructions. And there were two causes. One of them is they knew I wasn't going to follow their directions anyway, so they give me bogus directions. Number two, they had no clue what they were doing, so sometimes I'd accidentally get the right information. I mean, what I've run to in the last 45 years has been, to borrow from Officer Tatum, ignorant arrogance, borderlining on the narcissistic. I mean bad. So what are you going to do? Exactly what I said. You're going to look into those four. These two you're responsible for, not the technician. The complaint and the cause. Why? You're there because you need to help take care of the part situation. You white collar, I don't care which one of you, shop foreman, shop manager or service writer. I don't care. Pick one. But usually it's the shop foreman does the parts running. And someplace in there, the two of you are going to be responsible for that. The service writer, that's a different deal. Especially if you're in a smaller shop, small engine, a large small engine shop, your RVs and automotive, on-road, off-road stuff, small off-road. No, service writer is going to be out there walking around with a customer, actually filing the complaint to begin with. And maybe even knows the cause if it's somebody that you pulled from the shop to fill that position. That'd be great. But the cause has to go down as a question mark. But that is the one that you guys have to deal with. The complaint, get it accurate, and the cause as close as you can get. Possibilities, just question marks. Give them something to start at. And you say, this is what the customer said. This is what I think the translation comes to as far as a cause to look for, and leave it alone. So you say, no, wait a minute, that's right. That adds a fifth element to it. It helps the guy in the shop. Helps the service or the foreman, service foreman, shop foreman actually have an idea what he's handing over sometimes if you don't hand a work order over yourself. I said, we got it from his description because you're talking to the more often that you can translate to some extent, but leave it as a question mark. Don't ever say, we want this fixed. Why? I sat there at a shop, one of the first jobs I had, and they said, well, you're a Cummins tech, right? Yeah. Okay, replace this pump. I can do that. Are any of these codes present? No. Well, then you don't replace the pump. Well, it's under warranty. Replace the pump. Well, it doesn't matter. I said, one of the problems these pumps have is this pump back here. But I did a check and found out that the transfer pump had no pressure. The transfer pump had failed. I took it apart and found out there was goo in the system that locked the check ball up, and the transfer pump could no longer draw fuel up from the tank because it hurt it internally and it dropped or stuck the drain back check. So it was draining back and the pump couldn't draw. Put a new pump on, fired right up. But they wanted me to put on that nice new, what was that, something PV44 or MV40, I forgot what it was, but it was a something 44 Bosch pump, expensive. Internally fuel controlled everything. The only thing that came from the outside was command from the driver and any other systems connected to the engine. I mean, it was self-contained. It was all Bosch. So if there aren't those codes there otherwise, it wasn't supposed to be touched. Well, the codes weren't there. Transfer fuel pressure wasn't there. So I fixed it. And they were furious. We wanted that pump replaced. Just two things. If you replace that pump without this pump, you're an idiot. And if you don't troubleshoot this pump before you troubleshoot that one, you're an idiot. They weren't happy with me because I was the new guy there. Turned out I was right because they were screaming, you better be right or you're going to get fired. And then it's just somebody walking around from the shop. And found out later on he was supposed to be the head mechanic. And I said, listen, punk, I got an idea what I'm doing here. Shut your mouth and get back to your own work. No. A couple of days later, somebody said, what'd you tell him? I told him, you don't realize that's a shop rat. It was. Boss come out screaming. I told him, you want me to replace that pump? I will, but it's kind of stupid. Let me check this pump. What are you doing that for? I said, because it isn't developing any pressure to feed the main pump. So I can follow what you want, but you're not going to get warranty, and you're going to come out here and scream at me anyway. All right, do your job. But you better be right. It doesn't matter. How do you get it through their head? This may have caused that pump to fail. And you can't get it through. Even somebody who was a mechanic years past, when they're looking at their management position and their poor little fanny, you guys all of a sudden turn over to little sheep crying for help. You better be right. Well, that's egotism. That's not helping anybody, and it's not the 4. It's not the 5. Just saying. It's important. Because the other part of it is shop morale. You can't be screaming at your people all the time. You got to be divvying up your work. Now, what's my idea, the purest way that could have handled that situation? One of them was the service writer, and in this case, to show you boomers aren't what you think they are, even old guys. I was coming in, I was about 41 years old, and there was a woman up front as a service writer, Sharon. And Sharon was there because of the way Sharon looked. There was no doubt about it. If she dressed up, she was killer. So she tried to dress down most of the time to keep the comments and everything down. She knew what she was hired for. In fact, I made a comment one time and I said, well, I said, you got the brains, but that ain't what you were hired for, is it? She said, no. I said, well, at least you're good on both levels. And she laughed and out the door I went. It means something when you're in your 40s and you can make little comments that give her a pat in the back. Yeah, she looks good, but she's handling her job well. She was. So what would she do? She'd bring in, get the complaint, sometimes go out to the truck and listen to it herself and write some notes down. Excuse me. If she didn't have time for that, and one of the other guys would free, she'd send them out to listen to the truck or take it for a test drive. They'd come back, have an opinion, and write down something on there. We'd have an idea to begin with. So service writer Sharon did her job and did it fairly well. Now on the other side, well, I say fairly well. It wasn't all her fault in any stretch. I'm going to give her a 95%, somewhere in there. They had the guys from out front coming out back barking orders that they wanted done that just couldn't be done. We want this, and walk off. And she got pinched a few times for some stuff like that. Well, we want this warranted, and walk off, and it's not warranty. It's nothing she could do. Call and try, but give it her best, but you just can't bark orders down the line what you want and have it happen because there's a third party involved called the manufacturer or the distributor in some cases. So she would do that and was in a tight position, and you need to understand that as well. And we didn't necessarily get along, but we could do our jobs well enough to get along. And she was harangued all day long, even by some of the shop guys. It's like, you work with her, stop asking for a date. I looked at one guy and laughed. I said, as good as she looks, she's still old enough to be your mother. He said, oh, that's what makes it even better. I was like, you're a sick puppy. He says, yes, I am. And off the other side of the shop he went. It's the atmosphere. So she hands it off, and you go out and do your thing, and you've already got somebody who played, troubleshooter for first part, or at least went for a test drive. So your complaint and your cause might be something there. Now you're looking for the correction is what you're looking for, but no, you're going back to the actual cause. You're looking in an area. And if you're doing that as the white-collar guy from the service writer going out, maybe, in our case, there was supposedly a shop foreman, that little rat for the boss up front, but he never came out and gave anybody any information, even after he drove and checked and did whatever. And if he did, he demanded that you follow his order. And he was usually wrong. Why? Because he was trying to make himself look good. So nobody working in the shop should be doing the prelim to bring the machine in. Or either Sharon should have been doing it, but she was capable, not bad. She was capable. Or in some cases, there was another service writer of sorts. Or an actual, real live, non-working shop foreman that was taking care of the tools and equipment around the shop, as well as managing between the guys bringing the stuff up to take care of either parts and or the final write-up. So, hand it to him. He takes it out, talks to the guy. He has an idea what to do, hands him the keys, and off they go. And now it's in the technician's hand. And what have you got? You have complaint, and you have possible causes and discussion of what's going on, so that you can find out what the correction might be. So you got steps 2 and 3 already underway, and nobody's even started the thing up. And you've also got the track going back for parts. The shop foreman should be the go-to, the bounce-off guy, to leave the service writer alone, especially in Sharon's case. If she's handling warranties, free her up to do the warranty. If she's handling parts, then somebody else needs to do the warranty. It shouldn't be any more than a couple of different positions here. The shop foreman guy, he can run the parts, and he can make sure the literature is available and or make sure the literature is received as far as tech and bulletins and service manuals, and if needed be, the home owner's manual, and sometimes parts breakdown and parts lists. You say, well, now wait a minute, my service, yeah, maybe the service manager does, but I think the shop foreman ought to be involved in that. Be able to hand it off and keep things moving from. And if you say, well, now you're looking at, that's right, you're looking at the possibility of large shops having 2 shop foremen for that. Possibly. But one shop foreman to handle the service side and equipment, and the other shop foreman guy to handle the parts for the equipment and the parts for the rest of the guys in the shop. Yes, that's meaning a separate parts guy. And then you have a decision to make whether the mechanics go direct, which is usually best, or the shop foreman playing go-between. So that's a decision you need to make too. But usually if you have a shop parts guy, he can come out and take a look at it and go back and assist you in getting the parts for your individual job much better. So now you have 3 involved in your larger shops, and the shop service manager isn't even involved yet. Why? Because when it comes down to the final thing on warranties and writing up the work orders, when you come to the end result, you're the service manager. You got to make sure it's happening. Then when the warranty is submitted, it's your signature that's probably going to go on there. So you're going to be the final end result on that, as well as the shop tickets coming through. Maybe you hand it off to the service writer to do the finalize. But you should be putting an eye on some of the stuff as it's going through, because now you have the time to do it. You're not chasing parts. You're not chasing equipment. You're not updating your fuel levels or oil levels or anything else. That's being handled. Your intake is being taken care of. The possible causes being taken care of, as far as go out, talk with the customer, the walk around and such. That's all being taken care of. And what are you doing? You should be finalizing work orders and finalizing what's going out for warranties, because it's going to be your butt in the line. Now, if something is egregious, then you should be the last one also involved in finding that extra technical service information, or the guy that's calling around looking for, we've got such and such a problem here and it just doesn't add up, calling your other branches or other companies or the main company or whoever for service information. Now, that's my idea for a shop breakdown. That's in a larger shop. You got a smaller shop, you got 5 employees, that's going to be more difficult. Now you're going to have one person, and occasionally some companies do too. Well, I still have the same similar delegation that parts, intake, and final write-ups should go to the service writer. And over here, service manager, you should be handling the final results, looking all those things over before this guy submits it. Work orders and warranties. And the 2 of you should be knocking back and forth on taking care of the equipment within the shop. And one of you, which sometimes ends up the service writer because he knows the customer, but others, sometimes the service manager goes out and assists the technicians in their parts list. He has a parts list going all the way through, but one of you should finalize it before going up front to the parts department for one main reason. I used to forget something on Alice Chalmers all the time, and I knew the Alice Chalmers 180, 185, 190, 190 XT, 200. I knew their transmissions inside and out. It wasn't much different going down to the 170s, 175, D14s, D15s. I knew these things inside and out. I would always forget a shim, always forget a pin, or be putting it together and told by the parts man, everything's here, go ahead. And you find out that, no, a quarter of your parts aren't there, but it looked good on paper because they picked it up and looked and it said, oh, everything we ordered is here, but the back orders are on another sheet. So you run into that stuff all the time. And that's something that, it, in a lot of senses is unavoidable, and that's why I think sometimes it's better off that someone in between handles that stuff, or a dedicated parts guy for the shop. Now, we had 5, 6 guys in the shop. One place I worked at, and they had 3 guys in parts, and one of them was supposed to be dedicated to us and shipping in and out. And he decided not to be dedicated to us and had been around long enough that he just did his parts in and out and customer stuff. You guys can wait. So we'd be up there sitting sometimes half hour, 45 minutes on the clock. Bosses would get all angry. We'd tell him, we came back here, told you about it. He said, go on back up, don't worry about it. Now you start yelling because there's all this free time. You want to charge it to parts? That's something you have to do. I can't. They started keeping track of us going up front for parts. That made some change. That's why I say you need to be involved in all of this in one form or another. If it's something simple, no. A guy comes in for maintenance. You ought to have a maintenance package all set up. You ought to be able to walk up front and say, I got this machine, and I need maintenance parts for 200-hour service. Just that simple. And if you're not, because you're a guy in the shop without all that information very easily, you should be able to walk up front and say, I've got customer A that bought the machine here, and we need the next service up on the list. They should be able to go back in, look at the services, and say, yep, you need this service. Then that'd be a dedicated parts man, and you're talking in a shop of 5 or 6 guys, plus a truck driver. So it's possible. It's harder, but when your top guy is getting paid 24, 25 an hour, and you're charging $130 an hour, get over it. Well, yeah, we can't have the guys in the shop running around. That's exactly my point. You can't have them running around with dead air time at $130 an hour. You should have several jobs lined up so that they can move from this one, get it drained and dripped, and while he's doing that, the parts are coming in. In fact, you ought to have the parts ready for services before the guy ever sees the machine. But just in case, when you get busy, because I've seen it, 10 customers all lined up, they want all their stuff repaired in April. Nothing you can do about it. Just keep moving. And the other one is 2 work orders. What do you mean? One to the shop guy and one to the parts guy. You wrote the thing up, print 2 of them out. If possible, your company has some intelligence. There should be a message network where when you get done writing up the work order, you send one up front for such and such a service for mechanic number 4 or Josh. Pick one. And it's done. You need to put shelves for not just areas, but specific shelves for a specific mechanic, period. Or technician. It's got to be. You got to have it. But there also should be notification that the stuff is there. I don't know how many times they used to have it. Empire Tractor was a folly at that. They tell you the parts are there, they're not. They tell you the parts are there on your shelf. You go find out they're on somebody else's shelf altogether. And it's not this set of shelves. They put them on that set of shelves over there. They had 2 or 3 places to put parts, and they wouldn't notify anybody at any place. I put them out there! And you go out there and look, find out, oh yeah, they're laying on a table in the break room. So, help your guys out. If you're running the parts back and forth as a shop foreman, that problem's solved immediately. And if the parts guy that up front, there's only one that handles parts for the shop, then it's his responsibility to get them there and back. And again, 1 set of shelves, 1 location, with 1 set of names that's easily accessible both to parts and the shop. And if it was half a brain like they didn't have there at Empire, they put the shelves on 1 wall and blocked them all in with shop service tools and other stuff. Made it miserable to get to because warranty stuff was there too. Why didn't they put warranty somewhere else in the building? And not upstairs 10 feet above everything else, unless it was long-term warranty and not tremendously heavy or big. But over here, if they'd have built the parts department and finished it like they should have in the first place, then the parts department could have walked all the way back there and had open cubby holes. Just put parts on these shelves. Why? Because the shelves would fill a hole. You just walk up, put them on there, and it's labeled on both sides. It would have been nice, but the way they handled it, with the right idea done the wrong way, is don't even bother. They should have crushed the shelves, thrown them out, and just handed the mechanics their parts. But they refused. Even heavy stuff, they'd bring to the shop, drop it on the floor, and walk out. And it'd be right in the way. What good is it? So you need to fine-tune what you're working on there. So you're throwing an awful lot into a simple thing. Not really. I'm simplifying, but disasters. So let's recap while we're here at the end. Okay, done? No. Recap, you've got somebody on intake, your service writer, or in small, severely small shops, your service manager is going to have to handle all this crap. No, you need 2 guys in the shop. Of any more than 3 or 4 mechanics, you need 2 guys. Service writer is on your intake and goes out and checks the machine for the cause, location, where it's at. And all that goes on the work order. All of that, where it's parked, is on the work order. It's critical. Okay? And you've given the common complaint, so now there's a possible cause that's already in there. Complaint cause. Very possible. Put a question mark there. So then when the mechanic knows, and he's handed it, he knows where the machine is, he knows where the key is, where the other one is, if there is a key involved, and then he can test drive the machine or drag it in, whatever doing, to find out what the actual correction is going to be. And then he can go out and confirm the thing. So what am I saying with 5? I'm saying split the causes up. White collar cause, blue collar cause. They're 2 different things. White collar on the intake should be writing up some form of a cause, checking out the machine, telling what you saw, pulling dipsticks and such, just quick checks. You're doing a walk around fast, nothing big. Well, how's your water level? How's your oil level? How's this? Well, I don't know. So, well, if you don't know, we're going to have to find out on ourselves. I've never checked this before. Now you also know something about never been checked. How many hours? You have more to write up right here. Double cause, white collar cause, blue collar cause, and you're working together, doing two different things to come to the same conclusion. It works very well. Even an ignorant can pick up on that one. You see dents, you see smashed, you see flat tires, you know, whatever you're going on about. A guy goes up and says, my dozer won't drive straight, and you see one track as loose as a goose. Write it up. Doesn't travel straight, left track loose. The guy doesn't even need to get near the dozer. He knows to take a grease gun. I mean, that helps drastically. So now you've got that on intake. You got, when you're coming from there, going to there, some guys put their work orders in a slot. That's kind of pointless. You put the work order in a slot, you got your computer, whatever it is, make sure that it's handed to the mechanic, not just dropped in a slot. The technician's got to have it in his hot little hands and maybe have the discussion with the guy that wrote the thing up, so he knows what in the world's going on. Like we used to have the discussions, even, you know, with Sharon there. She was pretty good, but if you knew how to talk with her like a human being, you get an awful lot of information out of that young lady, and it was pretty good. So that helps. You're talking, you're handing it off, and you can see, yeah, that's telephone. That's exactly right. The customer isn't going to say it like the service writer isn't going to say it like you're not going to think about it. But these two, you know, and you know how to work off each other and discuss it. But at least you know that oils have been checked, dents have been checked, maybe even a picture taken or two. They have an idea of what the problem might be. He walks around or she walks around, takes a look, and the radiator's plugged. We got a blown head gasket. You think? I keep getting water in my transmission. I'm low on antifreeze too. Service writer found majority of your problem before you ever begin. Okay, now you're handing it off to the mechanic and give him a quick, I mean, don't take any longer than a couple of minutes. Unless something is really egregious that's seriously important, take him out and walk him around. Now you know the location, and now you're talking about the same thing. You're not transferring words. Now you have word pictures. Total different world. Now everything's handed off and it's gone. Service manager doesn't even know what's going on yet, except he knows the job probably came in for so-and-so. Something else to watch for later. He's over there busy handling his warranties, his tech information, and take care of his tech equipment. Mechanic goes out, does his thing, finds out what the actual cause is on his end, so he finishes out. That's 3. White collar cause, blue collar cause. Finds the correction and goes back. Who's ever handling parts goes up, hands the parts list. It's not bad place here to have somebody check off on a parts list, and then the mechanic or technician go on to the next job. Just a general idea, something to look for. And make sure that you get everything that technician or mechanic wanted. Everything. And when you find something else to add to it, look it over. And if you have something that's an egregious, expensive question, then find that out, which means you can look up the parts as a service writer or service manager or shop foreman, whoever happens to have that, depending on shop size, and go on up. Then get it to parts and find out where the part. I used to like to get a parts cost list first, because there's some things like $60 spark plugs for Kubota machines, and you can get them for an egregious price of $10 down the road. So, just saying, you know, those are things that need to be worked out carefully. But the technician needs to be left out of that loop. There's a parts list, gone. He shouldn't have to do any more fighting. No, I mean, he shouldn't even have to look those parts up. Shouldn't have to look up superseding or anything else, unless he's run into something before that the rest of you haven't. So the repair's underway, repair's done, you're going for the correction, and you find out, no, you did fix one thing that was definitely a problem. Now there's something else, okay? Now you go back and you talk with your service writer and let him know, yes, this is fixed, I need to go on to something else. Service manager might need to get involved now just to say, hey, look, I went this far and got to here, because he's not playing around with the customer stuff, and occasionally he'll do warranty things here and there. as the two of them work back and forth. Now the service manager can come out and find out what tech stuff is going on. Usually the service manager's been around long enough and may have some ideas for you. And because you're not working with them all the time, even if you rub personalities, you're not working together all the time, and you can continue. So you get through with that, you get your tech, you get the machine repaired, you hand your work order in. Well, it might be to the service manager, it might be the service writer. Your company has to take care of that. Big enough? Yeah, you're probably going to hand it to the shop foreman. Hey, dude, all done. Yeah, show me. If you have a shop foreman that's free and loose, not running around working on anything else except repairing and taking care of tooling and what the guys in the shop need, parts lists and all of that, and sometimes even moving the equipment to them, because some shops get pretty tight, and that would be helpful. So essentially, he's the shop genius at the upper end. I said, show me. Go out there with the machine, take her for a drive, take it for a test, or just stand there in the shop and saying, yep, everything's working right. Sign off on it, take it outside and park. Why? Well, now you've got everybody else up here in the list, but in the blue-collar world, when that service writer or service foreman walks up front to hand in that work order, it has been definitely checked over. It has been definitely approved. And if anything else happens after that, there isn't just a technician hanging out there with a button as when to yell at. There's a shop foreman that somebody's more likely to listen to for some ungodly reason. But there's two people saying, yeah, we confirmed that it was done. Something else showed up. Maybe something else showed up later. This situation was repaired. Well, yeah, but nope, we confirmed it twice. Even if you have to have gauges and such to confirm that the fuel system is working properly, or hydraulics, or whatever. Now, when the service manager, he won't even talk to the foreman yet and say, well, it's here on the work order that the shop foreman signed off on this, so we know the repair was done. This isn't some half-baked thing, so I'll look into it. But on this end, I'll let you know that there was not a problem here when it left this building, when it left our yard, when you picked it up, etc., etc., especially in the case of small engine and chainsaw stuff. You put a spark plug in and all my carburetor's gone bad. Yeah, I put a spark plug in because it was bad. Retorqued your cylinder head so it didn't blow. Sent you out because everything was working. And it's confirmed that it was working. So where'd you get your gas last? Well, where'd you get your gas? That's irrelevant. I bought it at the same... Something went wrong. What's going on? You don't even get back to the technician. You're already looking at something that you, the service manager and or service writer, are saying, I have confidence that two people checked this thing out before it ever left the building. That's sometimes one of the reasons that you pay people to do their job. And pay them well. Because you're charging $130 an hour, $150 an hour. And in some cases, like we have down here, Wirtgen dealers, if they're on the road, it's over $200 per hour that Wirtgen demands that you charge. Why? Because of all the crap they want to work on their equipment. Which is kind of psychotic. Some of the Workman machines out there, Wirtgen, have these computer screens on theirs that has all the information you could ever imagine. Even more than Cummins would put out there. But what's the problem? You have to read 200 lines to find out where the actual problem is. 200 lines. At $200 an hour. Excuse me. So that's my blather for an hour today. But that's me in the morning to try and clear some things up. So in a small shop, you're just going to have your service manager running everything back and forth. If you're talking 5 guys and under, one service manager and a dedicated parts guy for the service department can help an awful lot in all of this. If you have a dedicated parts guy that can operate as the service intake, now you're golden, very golden. But that's not going to happen very often. Companies don't like combining things. And unless you have a good guy that's running parts for the service department that came from service, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a dedicated parts guy working with service. That works great in the parts side, but he's not going to be able to help you on intake, so don't bother. Unless you, like I said, unless you have somebody who's been there. That could work out very well for the small shop with what, less 5 guys or less. Very nicely. Send him in. He's handling parts for the shop and service write-ups. Then hand it off to the service manager after that, saying, "Tell you what, I'll take the write-up here." And this may sound weird, but it would work very well. And say, "Now that we've got this written up, I've entered you into the computer here. Now go back, talk to the service manager, and he'll discuss your machine with you." Or if you have time, the service writer, go out and walk around with the customer. The machine's here, the machine's parked there, sitting here in the work order, hand it back to the shop. So in other words, you can do a dividing line where these are the PR white collar people and these are the blue collar working guys. Even though you got white collar management there, still, this is shop and this is customer end. And you'll be able to keep the two completely separate that way. Get into the shop, the service manager is going to do everything else there, and occasionally you might have to pull somebody off to do warranty here and there. That's something that's probably done on the weekends where you pay either the service manager and or the parts writer. Combination job that they come in on the weekend and get paid extra money to handle your warranties. Or shop tools or whatever else. Just give them a little extra bonus to do it. That's well worth it in a small shop. To get her done. What have you done? You've let your guys do their job out back so they don't have any more griping to do. Then when you walk into the break room for the guy that's been there 45 minutes on a 30-minute lunch, find out why. And you have an obligation to find out why now, because you've put out for them already. I see that as a blue-collar guy as being very important. You gave up front and did what they needed up front. Now when you go gripe to them, you'll find very few guys that'll argue back. And those that do, when you fire them, after you give them 2, 3, 4, 5 tries, whatever you want, you just laugh and say, "Have a nice day." "What do you mean?" "Have a nice day. Hand me your time card." "Well, wait a minute, and don't bother to ask if I'll give you a referral. You have a nice day. We gave you chances. You blew them all, and there's no reason for us to back you from this point on. You have a nice life. If you're going to file for unemployment, that's fine. If you're going to fight us anymore, don't file for unemployment because we'll contest." Why? Because you've already properly, morally, reasonably, justly given them everything they needed to get their jobs done right and worked with their attitude or your own attitude, because something about that white collar deal gets guys uppity. They get chafed real easy, and I don't know why, but if you've handled everything else for them and you're in that job, every once in a while you got to listen to a little crap now and then from them. And if you do, and you have confidence to say, "Yeah, well, we've already taken care of that and you're still griping, can't help you." And when they come in and you caught them 45 minutes here, an hour there, something else there, they're on their phone someplace else and they're egregiously violating, write it up, they egregiously violated, and say, "Punch your time card and go home. Have a nice life. Don't call us back. Don't file for unemployment because we will contest." And I say that as one who's been contested for unemployment before and still got the check. And I said, "Why?" I said, explained clearly why. "Well, you had another job as soon as you left." "No, I didn't." I said, I've been part of this pulling team in the past, never got paid, no compensated. And I said, and now I'm still working for that same team, never got paid, never getting compensated. It's the same job. I said, "He doesn't want to pay." I said, "If you remember correctly and look into your files, he has that history, doesn't he?" She says, "Well, yes, he does." So up and up on blue collar end, but on the white collar end, you want to be that one that says, "No, we fired him with cause." "What'd you fire him for?" Write it up. Spending too much unpaid time off the clock. And don't be stupid about it. Guy shows up 35 minutes, 40 minutes. He has a problem at home or something else that's legitimate that happens now and then. Maybe once every couple of months there's something seriously going on at home. He has to call and get it straightened out. Maybe his wife's in the hospital or whatnot. You give him a break. If you aren't going to give him that break, then he's not going to give you any breaks on his end. And you say, "Well, they're going to take advantage of it." Yeah. If you're not keeping in touch with them and what they're doing, yes. And that's a responsibility of the service manager overall. Finding out where his guys are, what's going on with them, and keeping apprised of what's going on at home. Because there's some times that a guy has to pack up and go. His wife's at home having trouble. He's got to go. You got to let him. And if it's something that she's just having an emotional breakdown and somebody else can take care of it, that's when you need to have the discussion and the talks with them prior to and know who they are to know what the situation might be. Because there are some guys that start getting up in years that are critical technicians and critical mechanics and hard workers in the yard. Maybe it's some guy that's retired and coming in doing your yard work, but he has an older wife at home who's ailing, and maybe he's ailing too. You got to give them those breaks. But you need to know those breaks, to know that they're honest and know their personality. And in some cases, maybe you're the one that improved somebody's life, and you'll go on the record for that there, that an employee was well taken care of, and customers find out about that crap. And they come in more willingly to listen to you because you've listened to the people around you. Well, that's long-term stuff. There's no doubt about it. But it's important. It's crucial. All right, I did it. It killed my hour. See you later.